The knock on my door wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the kind of weight that only desperation can give to something as small as a pair of trembling knuckles against wood. I opened the door expecting a package, or maybe a neighbor asking about a parking spot. Instead, I found her standing there in the dim hallway light, surrounded by 2 worn suitcases and a silence so heavy it felt like it could break the floor beneath us. Her eyes were red, not from loud sobbing, but from the kind of crying that happens quietly, when no one is supposed to see. The eviction notice was still crumpled in her hand. And before I could think, before logic could catch up with instinct, I heard myself say, "Move in with me." She stared at me like I had just made a cruel joke at the worst possible time. "That's not funny," her eyes seemed to say, even before her lips formed the words. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, in the idea that sometimes the smallest acts can change someone's entire life, then take a second right now to like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel, The Kindness Chronicles. Stories like this deserve to be heard. Her name was Alara. She had moved into the apartment across from mine 8 months earlier. At first, she was just a quiet presence in the hallway, someone who nodded politely while checking her mail. Over time, we had exchanged small courtesies, holding the elevator, picking up dropped keys, once sharing a laugh when the power went out and we both ended up sitting on the stairs with candles like characters in an old movie. She worked long shifts at a local diner. I knew because I'd see her leaving before sunrise, hair tied back, eyes determined. I knew because sometimes, when I couldn't sleep, I'd hear her come home after midnight, her footsteps dragging slightly as if the day had taken more than she could afford to give. What I didn't know was how thin the line was between surviving and falling. The landlord wasn't cruel, but he wasn't patient either. Rent had increased. The diner had cut hours. Tips had slowed. Life had tightened its grip. And now she stood in front of me with everything she owned packed into 2 suitcases and nowhere to go. When I said I meant it, she shook her head. Pride is a powerful thing. It convinces you that accepting help is the same as admitting defeat. I could see the battle happening behind her eyes, the fear of being a burden, the suspicion that kindness always comes with strings attached. Maybe she had been let down before. Maybe she had trusted someone who didn't keep their word. I stepped aside and opened the door wider. I told her she could take the spare room. I told her she didn't owe me rent until she was back on her feet. I told her she could leave whenever she wanted. I told her I would rather see that room filled with hope than leave it empty out of fear. It wasn't a heroic decision. It was terrifying. Inviting someone into your home is inviting them into your routine, your privacy, your imperfections. But something in her posture, the way she stood like someone bracing for another blow, made the choice feel less like generosity and more like necessity. The first night was awkward. She barely unpacked. She sat on the edge of the bed in the spare room like she was waiting to be told it had all been a misunderstanding. I left a folded set of fresh sheets and a glass of water by her door. I didn't push conversation. I didn't ask for her story. I knew enough to understand that when someone's world collapses, the last thing they need is interrogation. In the days that followed, we moved carefully around each other, like 2 people learning the rhythm of a new dance. She insisted on cooking dinner when she could. Simple meals, pasta, soup, rice and vegetables, but she plated them with care, like it was her way of saying thank you without having to say the words. I noticed she always washed the dishes before I could reach the sink. I noticed she folded the blanket on the couch with military precision every morning. And slowly, the walls began to lower. One night, during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows and made the city feel small, the power went out again. We found ourselves on the living room floor, candles flickering between us. She finally told me about her mother's medical bills, about the debt she had quietly taken on to help her younger brother stay in school. She told me she hadn't told anyone about the eviction because she was tired of being seen as the one who always needed help. I told her about my own fears, about the job I hated but couldn't leave, about the loneliness that had become so normal I didn't recognize it anymore. I told her that sometimes kindness isn't about having extra. It's about refusing to let someone drown when you're close enough to reach. Weeks turned into months. She found another job, not glamorous, but stable. I helped her polish her resume. She practiced interview questions in the kitchen while stirring soup, laughing at her own nervousness. The day she got the call offering her full-time hours, she cried again, but this time, the tears didn't carry shame. They carried relief. But challenges don't disappear overnight. There were setbacks. A car repair that nearly drained her savings. A misunderstanding at work that left her doubting herself. There were nights she sat quietly, staring at her phone, calculating expenses in her head. There were days I wondered if I had overstepped, if I had made her dependent. The turning point came in a way I never expected. One evening, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of papers. She had done the math. She could afford a small studio across town. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She looked at me with gratitude so deep it almost hurt to meet her gaze. She said she didn't want to take advantage of my kindness longer than necessary. I smiled, but inside, something tightened. The apartment had felt less empty with her laughter echoing off the walls. The spare room had become more than just a space, it had become proof that compassion could rewrite endings. She moved out 2 weeks later. The day she left, she pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside was a letter and a small amount of money, the first installment, she said, of what she hoped to repay one day. The letter said that when I told her to move in, she thought I was mocking her pain. She had learned to expect sarcasm where there was sincerity. But by opening my door without hesitation, I had given her something more valuable than shelter. I had given her dignity back. Months passed. Life returned to its familiar routine. The hallway felt quieter. But every so often, there would be a knock on my door, not desperate this time, but excited. She would come by with updates. A promotion. A savings milestone. Her brother's graduation. Each achievement felt like a shared victory. Then one winter evening, almost a year after that first knock, there was another unexpected visit. This time, she wasn't carrying suitcases. She was carrying keys. She had signed a lease on a small house. Nothing extravagant. Just enough space for new beginnings. She told me she wanted to pay forward what she had been given. She planned to keep one room open. For emergencies, for someone else who might find themselves standing in a hallway with nowhere to go. In that moment, I realized something profound. Kindness doesn't end when the immediate crisis is over. It multiplies. It echoes. It becomes a chain reaction that stretches further than we can see. Looking back, I understand that when I said, "Move in with me," I wasn't rescuing her. We were rescuing each other. She needed a roof. I needed purpose. She needed stability. I needed connection. What began as an impulsive offer became a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is risk being misunderstood in order to be kind. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of a time someone showed up for you, or a time you wish you had shown up for someone else, please like this video, share it with someone who believes in compassion, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. Your support keeps stories of hope alive. And before you go, I have a special request. Comment one word below that represents what kindness means to you. Whether it's home, hope, courage, or something entirely your own. Let's fill the comments with reminders that humanity is still capable of extraordinary goodness. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a life is opening a door, and meaning it.